Good morning and welcome to the new Deep Dockets podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Abercrombie, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Sam Sanchez, the
Exactly. Your salsa, your salsa to your chips.
the bandit to my snowman, if you
I
remember
like
that
it.
Smokey and the
Heck
Bandit
yeah.
reference.
Got a long way to go. Short time to get there.
Yes, great movie, way before its time.
Still love that car.
Okay, Sam. So what are we talking about today? Let's how do you feel about death?
I hope to avoid it as long as possible.
Yeah, me
But
too, me too.
I
But
definitely think it's something that people need to think about, though. And I think that's what we're talking about today.
yeah, I think we got to talk about death.
Yeah. And it's something that, as one of the subjects I think are topics that people probably like to speak about least.
Sure.
It's something that you should probably want to bring up with your, family attorney, or if you don't have one, reach out and get one to talk about it, regardless of your age or size of your estate. I mean, we've talked a little bit about it in the past, but it's definitely something I think it's worth spending some time on.
I've noticed, recently, I guess maybe it's more so that I've hit like middle age as opposed to like, give a lot of parents and friends' parents dying. You know, my father passed away in 2019, so we had a whole situation with his estate, and selling a house that we had to deal with. So, I mean, I think that's the thing we got to talk about. We got to talk about people's estate plan. We got to talk about, what you do in that situation and how young do you have to be to do a will? I mean, people in their 20s aren't thinking about that, but then you got people passing away, unexpectedly in their 20s, whether it's a car accident or whatever. Um,
Sure.
um, you know, people need to start thinking about this stuff. And unfortunately, it's the thing that nobody wants to talk about, and because they think it brings what bad luck. Um, but it's the thing you really need to talk about it, because my word of caution to every client that comes through the door is, look, the will is not for you. It's for the will and the estate plan. That's not necessarily for you. It's for who you leave behind. Because I
100.
mean, it creates so many issues if you don't have that stuff.
Oh my gosh, beyond what people even comprehend, because obviously there's the legality of it, but there's just the emotional side of it as well that I think we'll address as we talk through this. But, family members who are left behind trying to make, heads or tails of what you would have wanted to have happened to your stuff, or who's going to pay the bills, or how's it going to, be addressed. You leave that to people who are mourning, having the toughest
Right.
time, in their lives, having to deal with your crap.
Right. You
And
have to, they're mourning, they're trying to get over the loss, but they're also, oh, I'm having to deal with who pays his electric bill, and I'm having to deal with, who sells his house, or who gets the house, or, who gets the china, or whatever it is. I mean, it can create a lot of problems. And there's been families that have broken apart as a result of
oh
of
yeah.
someone's death. And um, families don't get put back together easily when that kind of stuff happens. People get really, really, really sideways over deaths if they don't think that the deceased person's memory is being respected properly. I mean, it gets pretty ugly.
I would agree 100%. And I mean, I think you don't have to look far to get good examples of, situations to where, individuals, maybe they planned for it well, maybe they didn't. But, it's definitely something that needs to be dealt with. So let's start with celebrities, brother. I want to talk a little bit about someone that maybe.
Celebrity deaths. Well, there has been quite a number of them, but we'll talk old and young, so we can kind of use these celebrities as examples. Let's talk first about, well, the easier one would be probably a younger one, like maybe like a Nick Carter or a Jensen Pantier, which is Hayden Pantier's brother. Those are young men that passed away recently. Um, so let's talk about, like, so you're a 20-something-year-old guy, and you've got maybe a little stuff, saved up. Maybe you bought a house, maybe you have some kids. Why is an estate plan important for you?
Well, the big part of it is most people, I call them kids, but they're not, young adults. They started that life. Most people are starting to get life insurance policies, and they're starting to build assets. They're starting to start retirement. And so when you look at that, you think, well, I'm at the infancy of that. But that is all the kinds of things that a will, an estate plan can really address for an individual, right? So you're helping to kind of determine, what do I want to have done with my property? But along with that, it's really just as important, if not more important, is what does your family do should it be a truly tragic death? Let's say it is a car accident, and it's not just you, it's you and your spouse who pass away, and you have young children. So
Right.
your will can really determine kind of what transpires with everything that happens. How are your children taken care of? Where do they go? What happens to your property, your debts? What passes outside of the will? There's just a tremendous amount of things that can be structured to help individuals who are going to, survive you, and how they deal with the aftermath.
Right. And you got intestate, if you don't have a will, you have intestate succession laws, and they're different in various states. So you may end up sending your property to somebody an estranged sister or somebody or brother that you don't intend to send your property to, but since they're related to you by blood, they get it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it is your opportunity to say where you want things to go, and even simpler, it allows you to put into place, things that will allow say, hey, I want to be cremated as opposed to buried, or, I want this type of service, or I want, I don't want any flowers, but I want donations to a certain charity. It allows you to put those kinds of plans in place so that, your family knows how to honor you, or whoever knows how to honor you.
Absolutely. I mean, you can go as far as like, what happens to your body? Are you a person who says, hey, you know what, I want to be a donor. I want to, donate my body to science so that, whatever transpired, maybe there's some benefit that's drawn from that. It's, personal property. You think, hey, you know what, I've saved this for my son. It's my favorite cig, and I'm going to hand it down to him so that, when he's a young man, he'll have something, or it's the weapons that I inherited from my grandfather, or it's
Right.
my dad's saddle, or whatever it may be. I want to pass it to my daughter. These are
For
the
my
kinds of
dad,
things.
it was a Navy officer's sword. He got a sword when he was commissioned as an officer in 1966, I believe. And that's been going to get passed down through the family. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful sword, and it's he used it when he was in the Navy, for ceremonial things, but it's still important to him.
Right. And, Bryan, think about it in this context. If you're going through this process, your father passes away, it was his intention. He'd had many conversations with you about, hey, I want this to go to you, and then your son, keep it in, the male side of the family, whatever it may be, his last wishes. But he didn't ever execute a will. So then guess what? You're in another town, you're in another city, you're in another state, and your father passes away. You go, and hey, you have a sibling, a relative come in and say, hey, this is the coolest thing, I'm going to take it. You're like, no, I mean, that should be mine, really, because it doesn't say anywhere that it should be yours.
Right.
And it just can create tremendous amounts of angst between families when there's no need for it.
Right.
This is an opportunity for anyone, whether you're young, middle-aged, or older, to be able to sit down and say, should something happen to me, this is how I want it to go, so that nobody has any questions. Nobody has to think about it. They can, mourn me or have a wake for me, but it's not going to be about this kind of crap that they're going to get sideways. It's just not going to happen that way.
All right, well, let's talk specifically in Texas about what you need. I mean, the basics of what you need in Texas. I mean, you can have trusts and things like that. Those help with property and things like that. Those are definitely vehicles that you can use for more complex estate planning. But the basic will decides where you want your stuff to go, who you want to be the executor of your estate. Let's talk about the stuff before you die. I mean, you need powers of attorney for healthcare, for a financial decision. Let's say you're in a coma. You can't make any decisions for yourself, but decisions need to be made. Your gas bill and your electric bill need to be paid, and your house payment needs to be paid. You need to probably have somebody designated to take care of those things, because in the event that you are unable to do so, it's very, very difficult to go to court and get a guardianship taken out quickly, where you can get that stuff taken care of. Now, it can be done. It's costly, and it's sometimes not fast, but if you have this power of attorney in place, that I'm talking about, a financial power of attorney, that's a very easy decision to make. And if you need someone to make your healthcare decisions for you in the event that you're unable to, obviously make sure it's somebody you trust. But, let's say you're in a coma and you develop some sort of, infection or something like that. Somebody might need to make the decision to, have that infection treated, or whatever, some other kind of thing that needs to be. And then, of course, the end of life decisions. Do they pull the plug or not? I mean, that's always the big question. Who decides who pulls the plug? Well, a directive to physicians will tell you, you can decide that yourself. you don't have to leave it up to a spouse or a spouse to decide that. That's sometimes an agonizing decision for a spouse to have to make. And do I pull the plug on him or not? Um,
Yeah, do I keep
everyone
him
jokes
in a
about it, but
coma? Yeah, do I keep him on a ventilator? I mean, these are things that, COVID really brought to the forefront for a lot of families, but before that, it's always been in existence, and it can be simple things. Even think of like Bruce Willis as an example. This is somebody who was healthy, still acting, somebody who, you think is pretty much invincible. This is, what was his name on Die Hard?
John McClane.
John McClane, he's invincible. A guy you shoot him 100 times, doesn't die. But hey, you develop something that inhibits his ability to communicate, right?
Right.
He's now developed, Alzheimer's, the onset of Alzheimer's. So, these are things where you start to lack the capacity to be able to make decisions for yourself. Obviously, he's got an extremely large estate. I mean, as you would imagine. But even if he didn't, when you can't communicate, when you've lost the ability to make those types of determinations for you, if you don't have that type of plan in place, think about the trauma that you're inflicting on your family, on individuals who love you. That they have to come up with a plan, and you may not agree with it. You may say, hey, I don't want that person. I don't want my parents. And they're super, pushy, but they want to be in control. No, I want it to be my spouse. Or these are the decisions I don't want to be sustained. I don't want to, be put on a feeding tube if I'm in a, car accident, and I don't want to be on a ventilator. I don't want to be sustained that way and incur all these hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical expenses to burden my family.
Do you remember the Terry Schiavo case?
Right.
Back in, was it 2005? I don't remember 2006. I mean, that was the determination where, they had I guess there was a disagreement over the family. The family and the husband had a disagreement over whether to keep her on, this life support that she was on, whether she was ever going to potentially recover or not recover. And that was a horribly traumatic. I mean, it went all the way to the governor of the state of Florida, and then it went into appeals court. I don't even know how high it went in the courts, but that end of life decision making on Terry Schiavo should be a wake up call to people that you can make those decisions for yourself and say, okay, here's my directive to physicians. I'm telling you, my doctor, that if I'm in this state, this is what you do with me. And that way your parents, your spouse, your kids are spared that decision making and that agonizing decision that they spend the rest of their lives wondering, was I wrong to pull the plug? Was it right to pull the plug? You don't have to burden them with that.
Right. And I'll give you an example. It's a sad example, but it's for young people out there. This college student, the 20-year-old, I think he was, fraternity guy, went out, happened to party just a little too hard, ends up getting so inebriated, falls down instantly, he's brain dead by the time he gets to the hospital, but he's alive, and so
body's still strong.
Yeah, but there's no physician's directive. So now his parents come in and they're like, hey, you know what? We're making that decision. Is it his decision? Is what he would have wanted? Who knows? He never had that to be able to help them in that situation. Parents end up getting divorced over this because mom wants one thing, dad's like, absolutely, he wouldn't want to live this way. And so these are the kinds of situations that you can help your family, help your loved ones in the most, these critical crisis times, that the last thing they want to be thinking about is, well, what were his wishes? What would he have wanted? Because it's, everybody's got a different perspective on that. And so the best way to be able to put that to bed is to have these kinds of documents. And it's not like it's a, written in stone tablet. It's a living, breathing document. It's something
you can change it.
Yeah. So you have something when you're not married. Then when you get married, you look at it again and say, hey, you know what? Now I want to change it. Now it's not, this person I want to make that determination or have that power of attorney for me, or these I've accumulated more wealth. I'm on the lottery. And they're not, I got a great job, whatever.
And these 4 documents that we're talking about, they're not terribly expensive to have an attorney draft up. I mean, $1,500, $2,000, maybe at the most, $1,000 sometimes, depending on what it is. I mean, it can be very, that's not expensive in the realm of legal costs. And that's something that gives a lot of peace of mind to a lot of people. And it can save your family a lot of expense down the road. 10 times that amount of money down the road.
Easy. When you look at probating a will versus intestacy in Texas, it's probably, I would say conservatively, 5 times more expensive to do something via intestate succession without a will than it is if you've got a will.
So let's talk about an estate that's near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. Um, but just a recent, obviously it was an unexpected death. It was the death of Lisa Marie Presley, who was basically the sole heir of Elvis's estate, which obviously was pretty good size. I mean, I know there were some things over the years, that happened to Elvis with the Colonel Parker and all that kind of stuff. I saw the movie. Uh, but
Great movie, by the way. That kid can act, can't
Yeah,
he?
he sure can. But
Yeah.
the point being that he did have a rather large estate when he passed away. A house he had, obviously the famous mansion. Obviously Priscilla they were divorced. And I think everything was left to Lisa Marie as his sole heir, but I think Priscilla managed it for a while, and now Lisa Marie, who was controlling all of those assets, she's passed away, and her will, I think, left her daughter in charge of
Correct.
the estate. But I think Priscilla was trying to invalidate that will. Um, and I'm sure she has her reasons. Um, so that's leading into a huge, going to be a huge fight over the validity of the will. Um, so I mean, and I've been involved in a number of cases where there've been will contests over the years, where people are unclear about the will, people are unclear about the direction that they wanted it to go. And one time I had a case with her two wills dated just a few months apart. One side of the family got everything on that will, and the other one side of the family got that on the other side. I mean, so will contests can happen. They can be avoided too, I think, in the sense that you make it absolutely clear that this is what I want to do. You're not under any incapacitation, or any kind of you're of sound mind when you do the will. I think you can make it absolutely clear, and people in your family may not be happy about it, but your will is your will. Where you leave your stuff is where you leave your stuff. And if Lisa Marie wants to leave it to her daughter, I think that's her business, honestly, at this point. Now I don't
Well,
know
I would agree in it.
what the reasoning is the I mean, she was she was at home, and she was 54 years old, and she had been at the Emmys or the
Yeah.
Oscars or some
Two
award
nights
show
before. Yeah.
2 nights before, and just that's it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about wills and what makes them complex is you're right. It's not the actual document. A lot of times, what makes wills complex is the execution of those documents. And what people need to understand, there's all kinds of, um, you know, companies out there now that want to sell you dirt cheap
Right.
forms. They want to tell you, oh, you can do it yourself, and some people may be able to do that. But I will be honest with you, you should never do that without consulting an attorney. And
Yes.
here's why. Because the actual execution of these documents are actually fairly complicated. And these legal drafts, when you look at something you've never seen before, you have no understanding or frame of reference of the law, you have no idea what you're actually signing and putting into place. And that
And
can cause
who you're putting into
problems.
place, yeah, and why you're putting
Exactly.
it into place, and what some of those legal terms mean. Share and share alike, what does that mean?
Right.
What does joint and several ownership mean, that kind of thing. Those kinds of things, all those legal terms have meaning. And yes, you can get those from LegalZoom or wherever, but yeah, you're right, you're not going to have the expertise of an attorney looking at those things and saying, okay, do you understand that means that share and share alike means everybody gets everything, and it's up to the executor to figure out, since you can't cut a couch in half, the executor's going to have to decide who gets that couch and what the
Yeah.
value of that couch is, and then give the other person something of equal value. So you get the set of steak knives and you get the couch, right? I mean,
Yeah.
those are the kinds of decisions that the executor is going to have to make. And a lot of people don't understand those kind of more nuanced legal terms. And I would also tell you that generic legal forms are generic legal forms. That means they try to make them as applicable as possible to all across the board, but they may not be applicable in Texas or whatever state you're living in. They may be, you may have to have something different. So it's worth talking to a legal professor. It's worth an hour of your time for a lawyer to look at that stuff and say, yeah,
I,
this is bad, or yeah, this is good, because a poorly drafted will can lead to just as many expensive problems down the road as not having a will.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think on top of that, when you think of Lisa Marie Presley and her final wishes, the problem that you run into a lot of times, and I don't know the age of her daughter. I think her daughter's like in her late 20s, early
Right.
30s. But, so maybe, she's a child star, or the child of the star. And maybe she's a train wreck. Maybe that's why her grandma's trying to say, hey, you know what, she shouldn't be in control of millions and millions of dollars of assets.
$100 million potentially.
Yeah. So, okay. So maybe that's true. Or maybe it's the book of music, Elvis's book of music. Who knows what a reasoning is behind that? But for the will that Lisa Marie Presley had prepared, no one would know. And think of the fight that could start.
I think it technically was a document that she was trustee of the trust, and I think it was a document that changed the head of the trust after her passing. So she changed it from Priscilla Presley
Grandma.
to her daughter, and apparently there was nobody knew about it, which is creating a problem. And I'm assuming there's some sort of rub between Priscilla and her granddaughter. And there's there's some questions about questionable signatures and how the document was delivered. And that's what you're talking about when you execute a will with formalities. You have witnesses and notaries and stuff like that. That way, if it's ever contested, the two witnesses can come forward and the notary can come forward and say, yeah, I watched this person sign this document. I saw this person sign this document, and that they were of sound mind and they knew what they were doing and they knew what their property consisted of, and they did it, and it's simple. It's wrapped up. Otherwise, you start getting into, who did what, how they were feeling, what they were thinking. Were they on drugs? Were they out of their mind? Were they, whatever, get all these different speculations and fraud and all this stuff that you have to go to court over. And that can be very, very expensive. I mean, will contests, for a large estate can cost $100,000.
Easy. I mean, I can tell you that we have, and not only that, but like individuals where you add complexity to things that you think are really simple. Is, let's say in your will, you really want to think through what you're doing, because let's say you go in and you say, hey, I want a portion of my estate to go to a charity. Okay. Which is great. Very altruistic. But what you need to understand is that creates this legal entity, which is out there, which potentially could even be the state of Texas, right? Because you're donating it to, like, let's say national parks or state parks. Instantly, another group, another faculty of people with their own wants, wishes, and desires and interests are now a party to this process.
Right.
So when you set something like that up, you've instantly overcomplicated it. Even though in your mind, when you were executing it,
I'll give it to the Humane Society or whatever, and then all of a sudden you got Humane Society lawyers all over your heirs.
Saying, we want to make sure that this is sold at the highest value so that we can maximize the amount of the donation. The other family is like, and the family's just like, hey, just want to get through this. We want to pay some bills and be done. And they're like, no, we need appraisers. We need, all these kinds of things that you never anticipated when you were thinking through this. But if you talk to a lawyer would tell you, hey, look, yeah, we can do that, but understand the long-term implications of that type of a decision. And you can still do it.
And the lawyer can say, look, you're better off donating $10,000 of your estate to the Humane Society if you want to, or whatever charitable organization. It's nothing wrong with the Humane Society whatsoever. But, there's nothing wrong with a charitable organization. But I mean, maybe it's much, much better to do a specific gift, like, oh, this is the gift of $10,000, or leave it up to the executor to do.
Or than saying, 25%, but what is that?
Right. Well, we want to get in and appraise the house. We want to get in and look at all these accounts that you had. We want to look at the cars. How would you have to sell your car and give 25% of it to the Humane Society?
Jewelry. You can't, hey, we want that appraised.
Exactly. So it's something like you said, it's something that you need to get a legal professional and have them review it. So
yeah. Well, and lastly, I would tell you, in Texas specifically, not all states have this, but so people oftentimes will call and ask us about holographic wills. And what that means is that it's just a will that's in your own handwriting in its entirety in Texas. It has to be everything signed,
and dated, and have testamentary intent.
Correct. So, where people want to bypass getting a will from an attorney, they're like, well, I'll just write out, like, hey, this is going to go to whoever, and here's my signature. How many contests have you and I handled, brother, where somebody tried to do that and nobody buys it? It's
And
not dated. That's not their signature. That's the wife's signature.
there's
It's,
no testamentary intent here.
yeah, it's
They
on the
just
back of
intended
a
that to be a
napkin.
note. They
Oh
didn't
yeah,
intend that to be a will. There's no witnesses. There's nobody around that when he signed it.
yeah,
There's all
yeah.
kinds of problems. I mean that, and then you've got to bring witnesses in. It's not, when you do a will in Texas, you can get a self-proving affidavit where the witnesses don't have to come down, where just the executor has to go to court and prove it up. It's
Mhm.
something very simple, and it's a very simple process versus calling in a bunch of witnesses, handwriting experts, whatever else you would have to do to prove this will, because people see money there and they start fighting.
Right. And then even not even money. Let's say you've got a really small estate, but you've got children, right? So like if you think about like what your assets are, what inheritance it may be, when we talk again, we're not really touching on trust today, but you can have pour over insurance policies that create a trust for the benefit of your family. When we talk about an estate plan, sometimes it's just these documents that we're talking about, which is a will, a power of attorney, a medical power of attorney, a directive to physicians. In Texas, at least, these are the kinds of things that you absolutely bare minimum need. But that's like the starting point. That's like the building block upon which you want to kind of grow as you grow, as your estate grows, as your
That's the
family grows.
basic insurance policy that gets you
Sure.
through if worse comes to worse.
Right.
But yeah, I mean that leads me to a good point. I mean, you brought up trust. Like, what if you have minor children? You don't want a 16-year-old kid getting $1 million or whatever. You might want to set up a minor's trust so that you can direct where that money goes and when they get it. The other thing would be is if you're divorced, if you have a mixed family, you don't necessarily want the ex-wife getting your minor child's money. So, and that could happen. So
Sure.
they could get at least access to it. So
Well, that,
you really would want to set up a trust so that you have somebody as trustee that can divvy out the money as the child needs it.
right.
So you
Because you
don't
may,
want the
yeah,
ex-wife coming there and
right.
saying, "Oh, I didn't get enough during the divorce, so
Yeah.
here's my hand."
I need more bonbons and pedicures,
Right.
which is a terrible thing to say, but I'm just, what I'm saying. The other
Sure.
piece of it, though, is, when we talk about these types of plans, it really becomes, your thought process. And I think that's what I would encourage people as they're listening to this and they're contemplating, do I need one of these? I don't want to talk about my death, is two things. One, really sit down and think about when you pass, how you want life to go on after you for your
For those
family,
left behind. Yes.
for those left behind. And the second part of that is if once you make that determination, why wouldn't you take steps to be able to ensure that you facilitate that process, you make it easier for them. Life is hard and it's short, and if you can make it easier for the people that you love, then I would just say there's no reason not to do it. You
Absolutely.
can do a short consult with an attorney who does probate and estate planning. They can give you some great information. It's not something that takes a long period of time typically to get those kinds of things together, and then you can put it away. The last piece of that I would tell you is I really encourage clients when they do these kinds of things is communicate to your family. The one mistake that I see most people make post creating a plan is they don't tell anybody.
Right.
So nobody gets a copy of the will. Nobody knows what their intentions are. They have to wait for somebody to pass, and then as they're digging through paperwork, somebody shows up and says, "Oh, hey, I found a will," and everybody else is like, "We didn't know they had a will," and that's
Right.
what starts the problem. So I would tell you communicate that, and then as you're communicating it, just make sure that you're staying in touch with the attorneys who prepare these for you so they can update them.
Right.
Because to your point, Brian, you get divorced. Guess what? You gave everything to your spouse or your wife at the time. Now you're divorced, or your husband at the time. And hey, there's other people in your life, and you sure as hell don't want it to go to them. But your will still says that. Well, guess what? That basically means nobody knows what the hell's happened, because most of the times divorce is going to vitiate those types of designations.
Right.
So if you
So
have an
then where the
updated
hell
will
does it go?
set,
It invalidates
right?
the whole will. So if you gave everything to your spouse and then she's invalidated, then unless you have a backup beneficiary in there,
Yeah,
that you
you've
may or may not want to
remarried,
change. Yeah.
you've got other additional children. I mean, these are the kinds of things that people just, life happens to them. And to your point, the examples that we're coming up with, Lisa Marie Presley, you think she went home 2 days later and thought she was going to die? No. Do you think that Bruce Willis thought, hey, you know what, I'm going to develop this degenerative disease where I'm not going to be able to communicate, and I'm going to have, the early onset of extreme Alzheimer's? No. Do you think people like plan to get in car accidents and die? No. And so, these are the kinds
Right.
of
Anne
things
Hesh
that,
driving down the road just passes away.
that's a great example. Exactly. Hey, she's driving home, gets, sideways in a car and boom. So, these are the kinds of things that can happen at any point in time, whether you're young, whether you're, old, whether you're in the prime of your life. Just don't let these types of things be something that's cumbersome to your family later on.
Yeah, and it's not hard to do. It's you can get it done, and we can do it in even two meetings. One for the preparation of the documents and one for the execution of the documents. It can be something that's done very, very quickly in some instances, and very, and very fast. So very fast, very inefficient, very efficient, I guess is the better word to say. But there's no reason not to do it. If you own anything, you need to do it. And if you have kids, you need to do it. It's only going to benefit you.
Yeah. Own anything, owe anything, have children. Yeah. You need one. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, all right, man. So the way they get their wills done is they call us or they take a look on our website, www.aswlawoffice.com. You can reach out to Sam or me. My direct line is 281-374-4741. You can call me, and I'm in the Houston, the Woodlands area. We can do pretty much anywhere in Texas. Sam, you're in Fort Worth.
Yeah, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's 469-844-7181 at the office, and you can just call, set up an appointment, and we'll get you taken care of.
Yeah, we'll have a chat. We'll, like I said, we can do, basic will packages. We can, if you have a relative that's passed away, we can help you with the probate process. There's all kinds of things that we can do to help you out and make things a little bit easier and give you a little bit more security in that. So, I guess that's the biggest thing, is you want security for yourself and your family. And, this is a simple way to kind of get that done. And it's more valuable than so.
Yeah, you need help. If you're going through it in any way, any shape, form, or fashion, you're going to need help to get it done, and then afterwards, you're going to need help to conclude it. So,
well, all right. Well, thanks for the time today, Sam. We are going to launch hugely here in the next couple of weeks when our new Deep Dockets podcast. But for today, we needed to talk a little bit of estate planning. So thanks for the time, and we'll talk very, very, very soon.
Always, brother.
Thanks for listening to the Deep Dockets podcast, brought to you by Abercrombie, Sanchez, and Wood. You can find us at aswlawoffice.com, slide into our DMs, or go old school and give us a ring at 888-981-7509. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinions of the hosts. It's not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter and should not replace the advice of competent counsel. So tune in next time, because with over 40 plus years combined experience, these dockets go deep.